Hey friends, can we talk about authenticity for a minute? This is one of those words that can take on a cliche or a trite air about it, something that gets bandied about in many different contexts, so much so that it can sometimes begin to lose its meaning or its potency, just becomes one of those things that people say. But I had an experience this weekend that reminded me that authenticity truly is a vehicle for ease in our life. It is something that opens us up to synchronicity and connection. It's something that becomes a vehicle for what we most deeply want to come through our life. It makes everything easier, even though the pathway to living our life, to expressing ourselves with authenticity, can be incredibly difficult. Friends, welcome back to HeartScapes, where we're learning the system of Reiki to live lives that are rooted, that are spacious, that are connected, and that help us remember ourselves. My name is Michaela. Welcome back to the studio. And I'm really glad to be back with you here on this early fall morning. So, authenticity, expressing our true self, speaking publicly or in relationship about ourselves, about our values, about our goals, our intentions, the work that we want to do in the world, our perspective on things from a place that feels true to who we are. That, of course, will be different for everybody, right? What it means for me to be authentic might look a little different than what it means for you to be authentic, might look very different from what it looks like for somebody else to be authentic. But the connecting force there is that whatever that expression is, it is in some way true to who we are. Now, that in and of itself is a challenging question sometimes, right? Because I know I have had experiences, times in my life when I felt pretty disconnected from who I am. And therefore, being authentic was almost impossible because I didn't actually have that thread, that rootedness into my true self from which to grow an authentic communication. It was a challenging journey getting there, especially in my work life. I've talked a lot about my journey into working with the system of Reiki, with the work of HeartScapes, and how it felt like something I had to feel separate from other parts of myself for a long time. But being authentic is something that we can claim over time. And it's something that we can experiment with over time. It's a capacity we can strengthen, and it's one that rewards us bit by bit as we do so. So, pressing pause on that, I'll just share a little bit about why these musings are coming up today. So, this past weekend, I launched my next round of my 9-month Reiki program. This is an experience that walks people through the whole system of Reiki from the perspective of its Japanese origins, involving a lot of community, a lot of individual work and classwork and sessions and all kinds of juicy goodness. It's a program I've been developing for quite some time, and that's really the culmination of the last 10 years of my work. And as I sat in this circle with this amazing constellation of people who were there, again and again, these moments of synchronicity happened. When something that I said or something that somebody else shared in the group that was, about them, about their personal experience, powerfully resonated with somebody else, or provided something that felt like an answer to a question that someone else had, provided an insight that shone a light on something that had been a struggle for somebody else in the group. These moments of synchronicity were happening over and over again. And what I've come to observe in my life is that these kinds of synchronicities can become utterly ordinary when we are operating in authenticity. Now, why would that be? I think there's a lot of ways to answer that question. But what was really profound for me this weekend was the way in which living our authentic self and expressing, communicating that self to others opens up pathways of connection to people and opens up synchronicities in ways that make everything easier. Let me say a little bit about what I mean by that. I realized that was a little bit vague. So let me back up a little bit. When I first started HeartScapes and I started working with the system of Reiki and started thinking about teaching it, one of the things I had to really grapple with was realizing that I had certain things that mattered to me that felt really difficult to share publicly. There was this feeling that I'm going to upset people if I talk about Reiki or if I talk about my experiences from this particular angle. And I don't want to upset people. I want everybody to feel welcome here. And so I'm going to be a little more generic or a little bit more aligned with what everybody else is doing so that I blend in, right? You might be able to see the fear underneath that, right? If I don't blend in, then I'm going to stand out, and maybe I'm going to stand out in ways that upset people, and that cause me to look bad or to, receive negative feedback or whatever that is. Specifically, those things that I was feeling shy about sharing, resistant to sharing, there were things coming from the whole rest of my life. Having an orientation to social justice and the desire for our spiritual practice to come into lockstep with the work that we're doing to make the world a better place. Being open and transparent and kind of having difficult conversations about some of the murkiness involved with Western Reiki and the way in which cultural appropriation has played into the adoption of Reiki into the United States and into the West. Approaching the system of Reiki from its Japanese origins as a result of wanting to be in better alignment and better integrity with the system, and making a case for why others might want to choose that path. I knew that doing that would put me in somewhat of an opposition to other folks in the Reiki community and would make me a little bit of a outlier. And that was in fact the case. As I started experimenting with speaking from these perspectives, particularly when I started speaking of the importance of having a trauma-informed lens in our practice, I found pretty quickly that I was rubbing some people the wrong way. I was having to bring up things that our community, wasn't really great at talking about, that there weren't a lot of spaces for, having the kind of messy, difficult conversations that I was bringing forward. And so there was this dance between, bringing those authentic parts of who I am, of my values, of my history, the 15 years of work that I did doing leadership development for social justice work, and working with cultural appropriation, with racial justice movements, wanting to bring that into this work of spiritual development, because honestly, that was the reason I got into it in the first place, wanting to create a space where people who are doing that incredibly difficult work could come and rest and get centered and get clear about who they are so that they can do that work from an authentic place, from a resourced place. And so I would bring some of that perspective forward, and I would get pushback, and then I would kind of hide it again. And, I wouldn't put it on my website. It would be something I would only choose to talk about sometimes, but not other times. And there was this great tension inside of me around that. I was feeling more and more inauthentic in how I was doing my work. I was feeling like I was drifting further and further away from, what had called me to doing this work in the first place. I even felt myself becoming generic in a sense. I felt a genericism to how I was presenting my work, and all of that felt bad. It felt really, really yucky. Perhaps you've had an experience like that where there's some part of yourself that you're hesitant to share, but in the absence of sharing that part and filling that absence with other perspectives that don't feel quite as true to who you are, you start to feel this kind of yucky feeling, this unsettled feeling of just not really owning who you are, being inauthentic. And that went on for some time, this struggle, this these little tiny forays into bringing more of who I am into my work, and then, feeling like I'm being punished for it, which was completely a projection of my own fears. Wasn't being punished by it, simply other people had different perspectives than me and they were sharing those, which is perfectly fine. But over time, I built resilience to those kinds of conversations. And to be honest, a great deal of that resilience came in the form of being validated by people who really did appreciate what I was bringing. And what I realized which is such a like a no-brainer. Like my business coach taught us this. Like people say this all the time. This is one of those things that like you can know it in your mind, but you don't really like really know it until you like walk it for a while. But this idea that when we are more clear, when we're more direct, when we're more focused, when we're more honest and transparent about our authenticity, what specifically we bring to whatever it is we're doing, our work, a conversation, a relationship, that is truly from our true self, then it's like a beacon that shines bright through the generic muck of everyone maybe kind of trying to do the same thing. And the people who really resonate with that will see it and will come. And slowly that began to happen, right? I started getting connection with folks who were like, oh, thank goodness somebody is talking about this. I've been wanting to talk about this too. You know, let's have a conversation maybe off of this forum where people are fighting with us about it, but let's go have a conversation. And that started happening more and more, and that buoyed me, and that allowed me to feel a little more brave in being my authentic self. I want to just, share that piece because I know that it can be so challenging to just really say the thing that's on our heart, that's on our mind, that feels so true to us, but maybe is a little bit counter to what is being spoken around us or the perspectives that are being held around us. It can be really challenging. It can be scary. It can sometimes be actually dangerous to do that, to speak that. And there are times when literally it is dangerous to be our authentic self. And so we have to keep that in mind, and we have to take good care of our safety for sure. But in my situation, there wasn't any actual danger to me speaking to these things, except the danger to my ego or, to my feelings if people were resistant to it. But over time, I did it more and more. I shifted away from spaces where there was just no acceptance of it or there's just too much resistance to it. Those are just not my spaces. That's fine. Those are spaces for other folks, but not for me. And finding spaces where there was a certain level of openness, finding those points of collaboration with people who really wanted to put these types of perspectives into the world, that wanted our Reiki community to have these challenging conversations, to become more nuanced, to become more savvy when it comes to intercultural and interpersonal relationships, which are fundamentally intimate when we're talking about something like the system of Reiki. More and more creating those spaces. And it became easier to say and be who I am. And I've come to peace with the fact that it took external validation for me to really feel more comfortable being authentic. I think that's okay. There was a while where I felt really bad about that. Like, can't I just be myself because I want to, because it's important? It's okay to be buoyed by external validation. And that really became something that I paid attention to when it came to validating other people, right? Sometimes we'll admire something that a person says because it resonates really deeply with us, because it's something that other people are not saying. And it's really helpful to remember that it probably took courage for that person to say it. And it would probably be really meaningful to them to hear that it's appreciated and that it's received. So that's just my little PSA to all of us, reminder to myself, to all of you, to let people know, right? When what they say impacts you, when you appreciate it, and when you recognize that it took courage or some level of skill to bring that information forward. Anyways, so that all happened over a period of time. And by the time I got to the point of wanting to create this 9-month program to completely pivot the way that I've been teaching the system of Reiki, I'd been teaching it for about 6 years or so when we started redesigning the kind of weekend model for teaching Reiki classes to this much deeper, much more extensive, firm and flexible program that runs over 9 months. Even wanting to pivot to that came out of these values, these points of authenticity that I had been exploring. One of the things that became, kind of dissonant and kind of crunchy inside of me was that the way that I was wanting to teach Reiki from this authentic place, authentic to who I am, and also authentic to the system of Reiki from its original form, that it just simply did not fit into the weekend model, right? Where there's 3 levels taught in 3 classes that are usually 1-2 days long. That simply wasn't an authentic vehicle for walking people through a process that I had come to view as deeply self-practice oriented, deeply nuanced in terms of the cultural and historical layers that mattered to me to bring into the teaching, and the ability to kind of experience the system over time and then integrate those different practices slowly into our life, and then reflect on it and get feedback together in class and so on, and to have a container that's spacious enough to do that, and to allow for flexibility and responsiveness to what the individual people in the program are bringing into that container. I wanted something that was firm and structured around really solid foundation of teaching the system of Reiki in a way that felt authentic and integrous, and was flexible enough to reflect and to respond to the people who were there. And so building that program was in itself an act of authenticity, an act of courage, and an act of risk taking. Because, when you completely change the way you're offering something, right, you're going to lose some folks, and it's going to take some time to bring, for folks who want that sort of structure, that sort of commitment to come. And so we've just launched. This is the fourth cohort that just launched this weekend. And, the moment that I had that sparked me wanting to just jump on here and babble about all of this to you, and in a way that hopefully is encouraging to you around finding your own authenticity, was looking around this cohort of people, and in each one of them seeing exactly the kind of person that I had imagined and kind of envisioned and hoped for when I thought about and felt into how I wanted to do this work, right? The kinds of people that I wanted desperately to work with back in the beginning of this program, or of running HeartScapes, but wasn't finding, right? I was, in a lot of ways working with folks who, in a hit or miss sort of way, weren't necessarily the best fit for how I wanted to teach. And of course, I know now that's because I wasn't articulating how I want to teach. I wasn't directly communicating, this is what this space is about. This is what HeartScapes Reiki is about, that might look different from other spaces. And if those things resonate with you, then come on along with us. And if they don't, there's really amazing other teachers that I can recommend for you. It takes courage. Any of you who have a business, you might know, you might have gone through this process that sometimes business coaches call niching, right? Where you're really narrowing down who it is that you are for and what it is that you provide. And that can be scary because it feels like it's limiting who you get to work with by narrowing down your focus. But, in a really, really strong way this weekend, I got to see the fruits of taking that risk, and see it in the faces of these people when they would have these moments of synchronicity, when somebody would say exactly the thing that somebody else needed to hear. And, the way that I was talking about Reiki was lighting them up because, oh, finally I found, this particular pathway into this practice. It was this reward for years of, slowly orienting how I talk about the work and how I put it out there in the world in a way that feels authentic. The irony is, when teaching Reiki from the perspective that I do, healing is defined as remembering the wholeness of our true self. That coming back to our authentic true self, our original nature, our clear, bright, luminous light that is both particular to who we are, to the way that we're walking through our life, and is also particular to all of life, that is that spark of life that is all of us, that our authentic nature holds both of those things. Literally, being authentic is how healing is described within the system of Reiki. It's described in a number of ways, but that is one of them. And yet, it took almost 10 years of this practice to really feel like I had arrived in that place in terms of how I am doing my work out in the world. And there's no shame in that, in it taking that long, right? Because all of this is a journey. All of this is, having a reciprocal dialogue with our life, with the world, with the universe, trying something, opening up a little bit more of who we are, experiencing what happens as a result, finding where we need to make a little more room, or we need more resilience, more resources, we need more people to talk to, more support, so that we can bring more and more of who we are into the world. It feels really good to really feel like the way that I'm doing my work, like logistically, is so well aligned now with the messaging of the work, that when we practice the system of Reiki, we make more space for our true self, our original nature, our authenticity to readily shine from us and to expand into all aspects of our life in ways that cause us to live a happier, more stable life. That cause us to live as an embodiment of the precepts, unattached to our fear and our anger, rooted in gratitude, true to ourself, and compassionate with ourself and all other beings. So I just wanted to share that little moment with you, partly to just, kind of celebrate the moment, and hopefully in a way that resonates with you, that encourages you to, to reflect on if there's places in your life where you are feeling called to bring more of your authentic self to bear, to make it more visible, to speak it more clearly, to assess, whether it's the right time and place to do that. Again, acknowledging that there are times when certain aspects of our authentic self, it's not safe or appropriate to bring them forward. I would hope for you, if that's true, that you can align your life to a place where it does become safe. But in many of these places where we're holding back our authentic self, it's because of fear of rejection, fear of criticism, fear of not belonging, fear of being seen, fear of our own brilliance, our own power. And in those places, there's so much we can do to soften the edges of those feelings so that we can live our life more of who we are, more authentically. It really, really matters. Our life becomes easier, so much easier when we do. The road to get there isn't always easy, but our life on the other side of it is spacious, it's grounded, it's connected, it is easeful, it's beautiful. So that's what I got for you today. Thanks for sticking with me with a little bit of celebration and reflection. I'll put links down below for the stuff that I've talked about in this video if you want to learn more about the 9-month program, if you want to just learn more about how we do our work here at HeartScapes. There's, of course, plenty of videos here on this channel to learn more. And if you have questions, if you have reflections, feel free to reach out to me in the comments down below or via email. I'd love to hear your experiences with authenticity, your moments of pushing through that fear, that resistance, of bringing your true self, or if you're still in that fear, that resistance, and if it's something that you want to change, I'd love to chat with you about that too. Leave your comments and questions down below in the comments, and I look forward to being with you again as you go throughout your day, through your journey of being more of your authentic self. May you feel deeply provisioned for that journey. Thanks so much for being with me for just a few minutes of your day. Until next time, I love you. Goodbye.